Where are crude prices headed for 2019?
I mean, we think crude prices are going higher. I mean, yes, there's the fears about the supply glut, but the OPEC cuts have not taken effect yet. They start in January. It's 1.2 million coming off the market. And we have signs from OPEC ministers, the Saudis, that they're prepared to do more if necessary. Now, obviously, fears about a global slowdown will continue to weigh on the market, but we think the supply picture should be improving heading into next year.
John, I think that's a key point. Have the oversupply concerns, has this narrative been overblown? And I ask both because potential OPEC cuts, but also because those waivers involving Iranian crude are actually temporary. They're only for 6 months.
That's right. And those waivers sort of tricked the main suppliers, Saudi Arabia and Russia, into rushing a burst of supply onto the market that has tripped us into this temporary oversupply. I would point out that crude oil prices held an important level yesterday, down around 42.50, 42 or so is the number that I've been watching. A lot of us have been watching to see if it holds. It did. And so now we're around this 45.50 area that has held previous support. So prices have settled down from the massive sell-off, I think, from here. And I have to give Russia and OPEC the benefit of the doubt right now going into next year because of the solid job they did for most of last year before the Iran sanctions sort of hoodwinked them.
But none of this is actually moving oil, Helima. I mean, what is actually moving the price of oil? Up 5%, down, 8%, up 9%. I don't see any headlines.
No, I mean, we had no bullish catalyst yesterday. It was basically just following the market. And again, I think oil has been dragged down by these broader macro concerns. But at some point, I do think fundamentals should reassert themselves in this market. And I think John's point is absolutely right, is that part of the big problem was the Saudis oversupplied the market going into the Iran sanctions decision. They're now walking that back. So I think this market should tighten up. And, administration officials have said, look, we're not looking to grant any more waivers for Iran purchases next year. So I don't think we're going to have the same degree of waivers that were granted in November. And I think the market's not focusing on that right now.
So production cuts, you think, would really start to be, inventory numbers would start to change the first week of the year?
No, I mean, it's still going to take some time. And I think the key Saudi decision, which we have to be watching, is a decision to lower exports into the U.S. because it's the U.S. data that everybody watches. So I think that will be a very important decision, is to restrict supplies into the U.S. market.
John, the correlation between equities and crude, it certainly seems to have heightened this year. How should traders think about that?
Well, you have to abide sort of the macro elements that are affecting the stock market that are also playing into the narrative about the demand for crude oil being soft next year. I'll tell you one other thing to watch, though, for crude oil to sort of go its own way and maybe go higher even as stocks continue to fall, is the exiting here of Secretary of Defense Mattis. And that now installs a real hard right-wing group led by John Bolton in the White House. And President Trump won't be sort of walked back from some of the more harsher decisions, if you will, regarding the Middle East and the setup there. His trip to Iraq yesterday, I think, highlighted that. It didn't go well vis-a-vis the Iraqi leadership. And I think the Middle East game board has gotten upended, I think, with Secretary Mattis's exit and what it portends now going forward for next year. So there's other things that are going to start driving this oil market beyond the macro concerns that are affecting the stock market.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would consider Patrick Shanahan a security hawk or a defense hawk per se, but how does this affect crude?
I mean, it's a question of who's going to drive the policy. And the question is, are you going to have a Bolton driving it, a Pompeo driving it? Does that potentially mean the U.S. signing up for a more confrontational approach to Iran? Remember, Mattis was the one sort of walking back President Trump from doing a more severe strike on Syria. So we have to see whether this means that Trump sort of takes the gloves off in dealing with the Iranians, or does he focus more at home and say, I don't want Middle East entanglement. So we still have to wait to see how it plays out.
But it makes the argument. It makes the argument for imposing the sanctions now, finally, on buyers of Iranian crude oil. I think that's the key point for the oil market.
I just wanted a quick comment on how everybody seems to have gotten the oil trade wrong this year. I mean, didn't you guys all expect oil to go out? If you look at the geopolitical landscape, it would argue for higher oil prices and hedge funds and positioning, and it just feels like one of the biggest trades that was wrong in 2018.
You know what I think, it's a lot I feel like I missed was, I didn't realize the degree to which the Saudis would absolutely front load the Iranian decision. And when you talk to Saudi officials, they really believe that there would be very few exemptions given by the White House. And so I think they sort of misjudged the market themselves, that they drew down their inventories in advance of that decision. So I think that's something I certainly missed, was how quick the Saudis would be to respond to President Trump's, demands that they put more oil on the market.